Okay, and welcome everybody. The Allied Arts Council of Lethbridge is proud to acknowledge that we are on Sikokitoki, which is otherwise known as Lethbridge, which is located in the heart of the Siksikapi, which is the traditional territory of the Blackfoot people. We honor and acknowledge the Siksikapi who have cared for these lands since time immemorial. And we also recognize that Treaty 7 territory is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, and many other Indigenous peoples. Thank you all so very much for coming this evening to hear from artist Jill Anholt. Jill has received national and international awards for her public realm artworks. Many of these art awards recognize her work's role in sustainability and in placemaking, which is the pillars of public art, either on their own or as they have been integrated into design projects. Jill's work explores hidden stories, systems and conditions of a particular place, which she weaves into dynamic spatial installations that invite active engagement from the viewer. Jill's process, which is rooted in the rigor of her sculpture and architectural education, embraces a wide variety of scales and materials and is engaged with both community and design team collaboration. Her built work has been integrated into civic projects for municipalities and developments across North America, including Eugene, Oregon, Ottawa, Ontario, and Vancouver, BC. So without further ado, please welcome Jill Anholt.
Thank you very much, Katie, and thank you for this opportunity to talk about this project for the Post. I'm really excited to have been chosen for this work. I'll talk through the process and the ideas and how it came to be. As Katie mentioned, I've been working in the field of public art for about 25 years now, right out of grad school. I did architecture and I did sculpture, and I found this as a really wonderful way to bring them both together. And so my architecture background really gives me, I think, an understanding of construction and of site and of collaboration with design teams. And my sculpture education has given me an understanding of form, concept, materiality, those sorts of things. So these are just some examples of some of the works I've done in other places. Every project is completely unique. I never start with any preconceived idea. When I go into a project, I do very thorough research. I come to the place, I read and research everything I can possibly find out about the environment, about the history, about the culture, always just looking for a little spark, and that starts the process. And from there, the ideas, the form, the materials, all are generated. So every project is completely unique. And I use a lot of different kinds of materials in the works, anything from wood, metals, light, concrete, glass, media, digital media. So I'm always experimenting, trying to learn things about new materials. So this project, I was very excited to be chosen for this project. I was born in Calgary. I spent a lot of time in Lethbridge as a kid. I had aunts and uncles and cousins here. So it was fun to come back to Lethbridge after so many years and to investigate it and try to learn about it as a city, but also to learn about the Post building and its sort of importance in this place. So this was from the RFQ that came out for this project. And what was really interesting about this project was that it wasn't a single work. There were 3 works slated for this. There was an alley screen, which was a replacement of perforated metal panels on a screen that was already existing. There were existing windows along the street that were between a co-working space and the sidewalk. And then there was also an idea about something integrated into the sidewalk. So it's very unusual to have so many different components, all such different types of opportunities. So I was excited to investigate that. In the end, the project, which is called Send, Receive, All, really speaks about postal correspondence in terms of writing, folding, sending, and receiving. At the same time, it speaks about Lethbridge, the history of Lethbridge, and its multiculturalism, its growth and change over time. So this project tried to bring about all of those things, weave them in different ways. So I'll talk about each of the components to the project. So this is the alley screen, and you'll see it just outside here, this very bright blue installation. So as I mentioned, the art RFQ asked for a replacement of flat metal perforated panels. So you'll see these around. They have sometimes shapes or patterns cut into them. I was more interested in trying to do something that was three-dimensional, so it wouldn't be just so flat. And in looking at that, I did a very deep dive into the archives, found a lot of these incredible pictures from the 1800s. This is the Lethbridge post office with all the cubbies and all the letters coming out and falling out. There's actually a great photo around the side here as well. And I started to think about this being not so flat, about it being much more, having this three-dimensional quality, having openings, solids, voids. And then I just started experimenting with ideas about letters. And one of the things that started to interest me was the way we fold letters. So you always fold a letter to fit into a particular size envelope. So it's this process of fold, 120 degrees, 90 degrees, folding and then unfolding it to read it. So through just doing some of these very analog experiments and looking at this, I thought there was a way of maybe using that to create a work that could actually be three-dimensional, almost a stop motion of the idea of unfolding and folding a letter. And with that, this is just a little model that we did. It could create an opportunity for a real play of shade and shadow, opening, solid, void. So this was the concept that was put forward. And then we moved into just trying to figure out how to do this. And because it was an existing screen, there was very specific dimensions we had to fit, and we had to be able to bring and attach to the screen, but I wanted it to look very seamless at the same time. So we developed a system. We had two different panels that could just interlock one into the other. So it would look as though it was a seamless sort of installation. This is how we designed it, and also allowed us to build these and bring them out to the site, so we weren't dealing with very large pieces. And this is just a little close-up showing how each of the panels work. So you can see 8.5 by 11 piece of metal folding either all the way open, all the way closed in series. And what was interesting is you start putting these together, you start seeing these patterns and lines emerge. This is just starting the fabrication process. What we did is we took metal plate and we bent it into all of the different 120, 90, 60, 30s. And then because we couldn't just take 8.5 by 11 pieces of metal and attach them together. We started with a base screen which had solids and voids corresponding to the way these fold. So you can see the background here. You can see the long sheets which we cut into the paper sizes, and then we welded them onto these panels. So this is kind of an in process, and it was a lot of work and a lot of welding. We had a structural engineer who was working with us to make sure all of this was going to stand up as well, which had some challenges. And then I'll just show you a few pictures of the final work. So you can see it here from the front. We ended up, originally I proposed it in white, but through discussions with the public art department, we realized white may not be the best idea, and for a number of reasons, getting dirty and also maybe getting lost in the snow. So we actually ended up going to an airmail blue, for any of you that remember airmail blue. And that's the sort of color we went to, which I think really works quite nicely here. You can see the way that the screen opens and folds here. And then one of the things that was most surprising is just the change of color depending on light. So this screen can be very dark blue at times. It can be very light, like a very light, delicate blue. It shifts and changes, and because of the way the light hits it, you start seeing other patterns emerging in it. This is the backside. You can get some quite interesting shadows coming through onto the ground through the open perforations. Just a close-up again showing color variations that are always kind of intriguing and different. And then just a close-up where you can kind of see, you'll see it's a little hard to see with the light, but you can see the little etching of the lines of fold, whether between the panels and how they move. So the second component of this work was for the window murals. And this was an unusual project for me. I've done glass artwork before. Usually we're replacing windows. So we're taking out regular windows, making new windows with an interlayer of artwork in the window. But this was an application onto a window. We couldn't take the windows out. They were already there. What was interesting about this is that there were 6 windows in a line all along the sidewalk, right at a level where people would very easily be able to see them up close. And for me, I thought it almost feels like a timeline, you know, something you could walk by and sort of imagine something proceeding along a period of time. And it became, in reading and researching, I became very interested in the immigration patterns and the multicultural patterns in Lethbridge. And if you do follow all the way back to the origins of Lethbridge, you'll see events, international events that have brought new immigrants here. So different things that have happened internationally. You have refugees, you have people coming, and you can actually trace different immigration groups coming through all the time from the beginning of Lethbridge till now. That was really interesting. As well, there was a development of the postal system itself. So when did we have airmail? When did postmarks start? When did all of these different kind of markings begin? So I thought it was an interesting idea to begin to kind of weave together these ideas into collages that took both markings from letters being sent and being sent from here, but being sent to here from relatives from many of these places. So we're looking at Syrian markings, Afghanistan markings, we're looking at early European markings. So we found letters in the archives from all of these different groups, and we sort of picked pieces and parts of them, and then we wove them together. So this is just showing, this is like a timeline. You can see at the very beginning starts from 1850. The first window has markings that show when pre-canceled stamps were used for the very first time, and we have a pre-canceled stamp. We have the Norwegians settling on the prairies, that's my family, back in the early 1900s. We have different Dutch immigrants coming. We have a new wave of Ukrainian immigrants coming. We have Bosnian refugees. So all these things sort of trace through these windows and collage together. And these are just some of the many stamps and markings that we looked at. We looked at thousands to kind of pull little elements from all of these histories to create these compositions. And this is a picture. It's really hard to photograph these, so they're in 4s across the top, but these are the 6 windows. You can kind of see how they run across. And if you go out there, I think you can begin to see the patterns yourself and the emergence of different events, cultures, et cetera, that have happened throughout Lethbridge. And then just a picture of one of the pieces installed. And another one. And this is the one where you can see them all along the sidewalk. So the last work, which was identified as a placemaking sidewalk artwork. For this project, through the research we'd done, the namesake for this building, J.D. Higinbotham, interesting fellow. He was a pharmacist, but he was also the first postmaster in Lethbridge, and quite a character. He moved here when he was 20, before Lethbridge was called Lethbridge, but he moved here. And we found in the Glenbow archives letters to and from him from 1884 until 1960. So he was an incredible correspondent and a bit of a dandy, and he had a lot of different girlfriends through that time, and he was a huge romantic, and he wrote these flowery letters, but he also had really interesting people writing back to him. And this act of writing, something we just don't do anymore. I was just talking to Brandon about our kids don't know how to write script anymore. I think it's coming back, but you know, everything's type and it's so impersonal, but these, we kind of were just captivated by the script and by the language and by the intimacy of these. And we looked through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these letters and got a really good sense of this fellow who was, as I say, quite a character. And then what we did is looked for sort of excerpts that just sort of struck us. Sometimes you read a letter and just something kind of catches your eye, and a lot of them are just questions sometimes, or provocations, or things that are still relevant even now. So we took a series of 8 of these in different handwriting. A couple of these are his, others come from correspondence to him, and some of them have to do related more to the idea of post, but many of them are also just quite romantic. So some of these, they're a little hard to read from where you are, but there's favor me with an answer. All day I've been thinking about you. I wish you were near enough to drop in for a chat. One never knows, does one? Your letter was carefully carried in my pocket to this day, divested of the envelope. The folds are beginning to part and the corners turn down. Just really beautiful little pieces. I so often think of you and wish you were here. So we thought these are still things, if you're walking along the street, you would be taken with and be kind of drawn into. And they force you to take time to read them and to kind of decipher and look at them. They're not immediately apparent as if they were just, printed letters in the ground. So trying to figure out how to get these into the ground was a very interesting exercise. We had originally thought we might sandblast them in, which I'm really glad we didn't do. We finally decided, because they were repouring the sidewalk, we could actually cast the metal in. And I had never actually done this before. We had an amazing team from Ward Brothers help us, and we did a little sample just to test. So one of the tricky things is you want the metal at the exact right level, at the very top of the concrete. But you also have to be able to support it all through the concrete, because there's rebar and there's aggregate and all those other things. So we sent a little letter, a little word to them on a stainless grate or a stainless screen with little posts, and they cast it, and we had a successful mock-up, which was very important. And then we created all of these. There's actually 10 of these sidewalk panels with the letters, and they're on posts welded to this framework. So it'll sit right into the concrete. They pour concrete all around it, and then these just sit right at the very top. This is not as easy as it sounds at all. And every sidewalk is not even. And then, you have to make sure you're exactly at the right level. These Ward Brothers were incredible. And the other part is when they're all poured, you can see on the right here, now you have to somehow scrape off the concrete to the level where you can see the metal, but you're not damaging it. So you have to grind it down. So it's this careful balance of how far down can you go. You want to show the metal, but you don't want to wreck the metal. And so they worked forever, I think, to do this. They did an incredible job, and it was not an easy tact at all. So I'll just show you the pieces you can see. And so it's really lovely when the light hits them and just sort of picks up the glint of the metal. And they are positioned in 2 different orientations along the sidewalk. And then this last one, we have this at the 2 ends, and it's dear with a bunch of lines, and then faithfully yours. And our hope was that maybe somebody might come along with a piece of chalk and have a chance to write a letter to somebody else while they're there. So I might even do that while I'm here, just for fun. But that was the idea for this one. So you can see the pieces here in the ground, and I encourage you to go out and have a look. And then the final work with all 3 of the pieces together. And yeah, I just wanted, I think, to finish by thanking so many people who made this possible. City of Lethbridge, especially Jillian, who is a big part of this throughout. Sumas, who is a partner in this project. The Allied Arts Council of Lethbridge with Katie. Joe Klassen, who I mentored from the Ward Brothers, who we couldn't have done that sidewalk without him. Kevin Spann from Warwick Printers, who did our beautiful graphics, local printer here. And then our team. We had a great engineer, a fabricator, an installer who came out to work on this with me, and a couple of studio assistants. So that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions, but thank you very much.
I am so curious about choosing from all of the letters that you have to go through. I would have had a hard time. So was there different sort of groups of themes that you sort of had to pick from? Is that how you
Yes.
did that?
So many different themes. So I was reading through them first and looking for excerpts that just sort of caught my eye. And then there was a whole process of grouping them into different themes. And I'm trying to remember, there was one set of themes that was about time that seemed really interesting for a while. There was another that we thought about the landscape, things that where they're talking about Lethbridge and the land that was there for a little while. In the end, we decided to make them more about people and relationships and maybe romance a little bit.
And just on that, I'm wondering if you came across any sort of historical, if them talking about actual world events.
Not a lot of world events, but certainly local events. He talked a lot about things that were going on locally, and he was a little bit of a gossip. Mm-hmm. Yes.
For the words embedded in concrete, what type of metal are the words made out of?
They're stainless steel. Yeah, and everything's stainless just so it won't rust. And also because of all the grinding on the concrete stainless, it's so hard. So if we'd done aluminum, I think it really would have damaged it. So it was all stainless. Yeah.
And was that stainless? Where was that made?
It was, those were made in Vancouver, where I'm from, where my studio is now.
In your wall too?
We made that in Vancouver, and then the concrete, as you know, is done locally, and the window graphics were done here, just printed here. And it was one of those things, I think, because there's so much hands-on, it needed to be where I could have my hands on it. But we had so much assistance from everyone here. And for the screen, with Jillian's help, getting the original panels off and then painting it in place, and then the measurements and all of that stuff was really impossible to do without a lot of assistance from the city.
So one of the things I find really interesting about the text on the ground is that they're kind of intimate personal messages, but then also seeing people stop and look at them and kind of get down close, it begins to be like a conversation between them and these. But by having them embedded in concrete, the stainless steel is going to hold up better than the sidewalk as people walk across it and over it. So I'm just curious, as an artist, how do you, where is the artwork? Is it in the text? Is it in the person's relationship with the text? Is it the concrete part of it? How do you feel about the concrete changing over time?
That's an interesting question. I think it is in the relationship is where the art is. It's in the relationship between the person reading and this person that wasn't intended for them, but it could have been intended for them. So I think that the interaction and the personal relationship between the text and the viewer is really, really important to me. I suppose over time, you're right, the concrete probably will wear down a bit. And I guess, hopefully these could be recast at some point, because maybe the metal will hold up better than the concrete. But the concrete I just see as really just the holder of the art. I do think of the letters and the interaction and relationship as being the most important part.
About the pamphlet. Congratulations, it's beautiful piece. I've enjoyed seeing people walking and then watching their pace slow and their finger down. Just the way they go to engage all the three different components of the project is really lovely. But I was interested in your studio. You have a number of projects, public art projects, in gallery, and I've seen things online, and we look forward to some of you actually more involved in this. But I was curious about the makeup of your studio and your studio assistants, and how that works for projects that, of course, are dispersed in our state.
Yeah, so my studio consists of me and one or two assistants. So we're really small. And the woman who has been working with me for the last 5 years, who's been fantastic, she is trained in environmental design, but has developed skills. Her major things she does for me are computer modeling and computer drawing. So I'm still very analog. I do most of my ideas with paper and metal and I make things three-dimensionally by hand, and then she can take these components and put them into the computer, and then we work with them in the computer. And what we found, because a lot of the work is in different places, it's better, I found it better for me to go there rather than trying to have a studio that makes everything, say, in Vancouver, because we also use so many different materials. So I have developed relationships with different fabricators all over North America, depending on the nature of what I'm working with. So if it's a metal project, I have a fantastic fabricator in North Carolina, if it's out east. And if it's a glass project, I have somebody actually in Germany I work with. So there are relationships I've developed over all these years. And I like to go to their shop and be there when things are being made. So I'm the one that's moving instead of, and that's worked out really well. And I really like keeping it very small because I'm very, very hands-on with my work. I don't have a giant studio where I'm handing off, designs to other people. I'm a little bit of a control freak. So that has worked really well for me and allowed me to be fairly nimble. Yeah.
I think more of a comment than a question. You expressed thanks to us here who had the pleasure of working with you on this project, but I think I would like to echo those thanks to you. You are a very seasoned, accomplished artist. It's interesting to hear you talk about how there were some firsts in here for you, because there were a lot of firsts in here for the city of Lethbridge as well, for the public art program. Our first large-scale private-public art partnership with Summits FK Developments, the first sidewalk inlay we've ever done, and yeah, also this kind of multi-component project was a first for us. So I just want to say what a pleasure it was going on this journey with you, and how much I appreciated your vision, but also your flexibility when we had to really problem solve some practical matters. It was a pleasure working with you and seeing how this piece turned out, because I think it's a wonderful success. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to comment too, as I was sort of walking very briskly along that wall in the rain, and the concrete gets dark, and I was noticing the text in the sidewalk, and I wanted to stop, but I'll stop on the way on the way back and read it. I didn't know, so it was very touching. I'm like, wait a minute, and Katie's waving me on.
Well, one of the barriers we had to overcome, I think, was some well-intentioned risk aversion and fear that putting things in the sidewalk would just cause mass confusion. People would just be falling all over. And I appreciate that perspective. And of course, it's one that we have to always consider when installing things in the public realm. But it's nice to see that those fears were not realized. And yeah, the sidewalk was probably the most fascinating process to watch, because Ward Brothers took such care, as you mentioned. They actually taped all of the pieces to protect them. But then once we were pouring, it was one pour. The pieces disappeared. I remember standing there with kids going like, oh my God, they're gone forever. And I was like, no, and Joe kept saying, it's fine. And then they settled it, and then they had to do a bit of sandblasting. And I think everybody learned a lot. It was all first, like I said, for us, and the product design as well. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful and subtle piece. I was there a few weeks ago, and I was stopping and reading it, and someone walked past me, looked over, wondered what I was looking at, came back and started reading it, and then one other person did the same thing, so there was three of us there looking at it.
It's like, that's really nice. That's nice to hear. It's really fun to come back. It's the first time I've seen the metal text finished, because it was done in the fall, just before the snow flew. So I saw lots of pictures, but it was really fun to get back and see it in person. So. Well, thank you for the nice call.
So I just wanted to, I'm just going to add one more anecdote. But I was walking past the other day, and there were a number of postal workers that were in the same sort of position where they had stopped, and they were looking at the sidewalk, and they were trying to read it and interpret it, and they were fascinated when I stopped them, and I was like, oh, let me tell you all about this. Please allow me to gush. And they were fascinated by your process. So I think it's enriched not only the community, but very specifically the individuals that work in this building as well. Yeah. So we have time now. So if you wanted to take yourselves into the adjacent space and have conversation, we have an opportunity to do that. But I just wanted to thank you again for your willingness to come to Lethbridge, and thank everybody here who came out this evening.